Today's episode of the Counselling Tutor Podcast is sponsored by Web Healer. You're a counsellor in private practice and you need a website, or you've got an existing website which you need help with. Web Healer are offering Counselling Tutor Podcast listeners, that's you, £100 off the cost of a website design and build. Now, Web Healers specialize in websites for counselors and psychotherapists. It's what they do. And the Web Healer team provide a completely non-technical, done-for-you solution, leaving you to focus your time on your clients. Operating for 20 years, Web Healer are a trusted resource amongst counselors when it comes to getting your practice online. So get the package details and claim your £100 off coupon for your new website by going to counsellingtutor.com/website. That's counsellingtutor.com/website.
Hello and welcome to episode 339 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast. I'm Rory and I'm delighted to welcome back Sally Anne Armitage to the podcast. She's a familiar and much-loved voice around here, a regular guest, a valued lecturer who produces content for our CPD and CSR libraries, as well as being a key teaching team member on our trauma-informed practice and supervision courses. It's always a pleasure to have her with us. So today, Sally will outline the key points of a recent lecture, Practicing Good Self-Care, which is available in both the CSR and CPD libraries. And with that said, let's roll the intro.
Welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, the must-listen-to podcast for counsellors, psychotherapists, and counselling students. Here are your hosts, Rory Oakes and Ken Kelly.
A very warm welcome to the Counselling Tutor Podcast, episode 339. And both Rory Oakes and myself, Ken Kelly, are delighted to have you here for our three topics, starting off with ethical, sustainable practice, where today we're delving into the world of the danger of dual relationships. They come up from time to time. It's worth noting. We're then going to Practice Matters, where Sally Anne Armitage has done another lecture for us. And Sally Anne has done so many lectures for us in Counselling Tutor, but this one is a home run lecture, and it's around practicing self-care. So it's something that we as counsellors need. And of course, Rory's already teed this up, but you want to be listening to this. We did this live recently. Over 500 therapists were on there. There were tears and there were amazing 5-star feedbacks. So don't miss that one. And then today in Student Services, where we recognise you, the student, on your formal journey to gain counselling skills in your career or to become a counsellor or psychotherapist, where today we're going to be speaking about what is your counselling philosophy. Where do you stand as you kind of go through this arc of your training and out into practice? But let's kick it off, Rory. That really important topic. It comes up from time to time, and it presents itself during training a lot. I think people talk about it, and then off into practice we come across it on a cyclical manner, and it's this dual relationship where someone that has some kind of connection to us asks us if we can help them with something. Rory, what's the dangers?
Well, the dangers, as I'm going to outline, are that clients don't get the best service that they should, and also that they may leave therapy. And this has been prompted. We covered this in a few episodes ago, but this has been prompted by a letter that I received in the postbag, not from a therapist, but from a client who wanted us to talk about dual relationships. And I'm going to take a slightly different angle on this this time, Ken. So a dual relationship is where we know the client in another setting. So say, for instance, a client phones up and says, I want to make an appointment. They come in and you realise that this client is the teacher at your child's school, and that you sit talking to them at parents' evening. These things have to be very precisely managed. But I want to share a story from my own training experience of a dual relationship that is sometimes not spoken about. So many years ago when I trained, my peer came into class one Wednesday afternoon, because we trained in Wednesday afternoons. And after lunch, we always had a case discussion, like a peer supervision. And she was very, very eager to talk about her practice and her client. So the tutor said, okay, fire away. And she said, well, what's happened is I went to see my supervisor and I spoke about my client. And I said, talked about my client. And my supervisor said, oh, I know who your client is. He was my client a few months ago, and went on to share information to my peer that the client hadn't disclosed to her, one being that the client was an alcoholic. And it absolutely ruined the therapeutic relationship for my peer, because every time she sat in front of the client, she held knowledge that the client hadn't disclosed to her. And she had to play this game of working with the client and not leaking out this information, where the client may say, I never told you that. Where did you get that from? And eventually and inevitably, the relationship broke down and the client left unsatisfied and not getting the best service. And none of this was my peer's fault. The supervisor should have been a bit more thoughtful about sharing information, because it was a dual relationship. She had a relationship with the therapist, and also she'd had a prior relationship with the client. Now, fast forward to 2 weeks ago, I have a letter in the postbag, not from a therapist, but from a client. We get a lot of members of the general public listening to the podcast. And if you are someone in the general public, I hope this is going to be reassuring for you. If you're listening, you're not a therapist, but you're thinking of therapy, I hope that I could go somewhere to reassure you. So what happened was that the person who wrote in had a therapist. It didn't work out very well and moved on to another therapist. And during the conversation with the second therapist, she discovered that the second therapist supervisor was her first therapist, and, as with my peer all those years ago, had disclosed information to a second therapist that the person writing in hadn't disclosed. And as a consequence of that, the relationship broke down. And what was at the end of the letter was she was frightened to go back to therapy because she had issues of trust and she might not go. And I'm often swear on the podcast, but I was bloody furious when I read that. Bloody furious I was. I had to go and get 2 cups of tea and a Garibaldi. And
strong words. We're going to have to bleep that, Rory.
just bleep it out. And, I'm making light of it because it's kind of, my presenting style. But I was really saddened by this and disappointed. And I know sometimes we can't avoid dual relationships, but in cases like this, it would have just taken the supervisor just to have kept their own counsel, or, maybe just referred the supervisee on. But it completely wrecked the therapeutic relationship. And I'm going to go back a little further. Those of you who at training watched the Gloria films, Gloria Zymanski working with Carl Rogers and Eric Byrne, a couple of other therapists, I can't remember the names. That was a dual relationship because the producer of that film was Gloria's daughter's therapist, and his wife was Gloria's therapist. And that didn't work out very well either, by all accounts, historically. So dual relationships can cause real damage to therapeutic relationships. And I promised the person who wrote the letter, if you're listening, I hope you're still listening, that we would discuss this. It's not an often discussed side of it, that therapist supervisor, the supervisor knowing the client. So there we are, Ken.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a really nice introduction and overview of this. And, you mentioned it's not a very often discussed topic, and we certainly have discussed it on the Counselling Tutor podcast a number of times. However, we've usually discussed it in our student section because it's important information for a student to learn the reasons why a dual relationship is not a good idea and how to look out for them and manage them. But I think that we put it today in ethical sustainable practice because this is something that we do face as qualified practitioners, as you've used in your very example there, Rory, happened to me as well. It's going to happen. If it hasn't already happened, it will happen. It's cyclic. It just comes around and it's really sneaky. It can sneak in a way that you don't initially see it. And I remember I was with mine, I was seeing a client, and as I was at supervision presenting my working material, my supervisor realized that my supervisor was seeing another member of that same family. And as soon as that was recognized, we recognized it was a dual relationship. I could not bring the material that I was receiving from my client in a non-colored way to my supervisor because my supervisor was working with another member of the same family and would be colored by the frame of reference of the person that they were working with. So I found another supervisor for that client. And that was our way of working around that dual relationship. So we've identified what dual relationship is. We've identified some actual occurrences of that in our own practice. I'm going to go into I'm going to give 5 points here of why dual relationships are problematic. So the first one is a loss of objectivity. The counsellor may struggle to remain impartial if they have a personal, business, or family relationship with the client, and this can cloud the judgment and reduce the effectiveness of therapy. That's one. Another one is power imbalance and exploitation, and those are big words. We talk about all these topics separately, but dual relationship increases the risk that the counsellor, even unintentionally, could take advantage of the client. The therapeutic relationship inherently carries a power differential, and as soon as there is a dual relationship, that is or can be magnified, and it's unseen. And another one is confidentiality risks. Boundaries around what is shared in the counselling room may become blurred in other settings, potentially breaching confidentiality. If that person is a family member, a colleague within the same working organisation, it can be tricky. Confused boundaries, which I think is probably the most obvious one. The client may become unsure whether the counsellor is responding as a therapist or a friend or a colleague, which undermines the safety and the clarity needed for effective therapy work. And one last one is damage to the therapeutic alliance, which you've already touched on, Rory, and given beautiful examples of. Dual roles can lead to loss of trust if the client feels that the counsellor is not fully there for them. And that's the dual relationship. Can you fully be there and not have the information coloured as it is coming in? That we have a clear frame of reference, a clear window to look at that with, or if the counsellor's other role conflicts with the client's expectations. So there's 5 areas where dual relationships might show themselves to be problematic. And I think of this, Rory, there are many people that go into businesses with family members or friends, and at the time of going into that relationship, it's the greatest idea. Everybody's excited and it's wonderful, but there's a dual relationship within that.
Yes.
And it kind of plays out in business. If you look at the stats in the business world, those can be really troubling. Unless they're very boundary, they can be really troubling relationships, and one or the other can become unhappy with it as it goes out. Rory, what does our ethical bodies tell us about dual relationships? Is it mentioned by the BACP, the UKCP, the NCPS? And we're obviously using the ethical bodies here in the UK, but of course, wherever you are, look to your ethical body. But Rory, share a little bit about what we work to in the UK.
Yes, well, I mean, ethical bodies have been aware of the difficulty and the challenges of dual relationships for as long as I've been a therapist, and certainly the more well-known bodies such as the BACP, UKCP, and of course the National Counselling and Psychotherapy Society all have within their codes of practice or ethical frameworks, paragraphs that say that dual relationships sometimes can't be avoided. However, they must be managed, and whereas possible, we should avoid them. And they all state that. I think probably the BACP has a kind of more deeper reflection. They have 4 topics within their framework where they talk directly to dual relationships. But generally speaking, in the psychotherapeutic profession, we avoid them where we can, and make other arrangements. And I wanted to talk about actually the other arrangements, because I think up till about 2019, you were pretty much stuck with the locality of where you lived. You would see a supervisor, and usually everybody knows each other. It's a very a cliquey kind of world. Everybody seems to know each other. But now, with the advent of online and telephone therapy that bloomed after the pandemic, the answer to this may be quite simple. If your supervisor does know the client, you're no longer kind of hampered by just looking for a supervisor in the local area. You go to any of the directories, you find anybody who does online work. You could speak to someone hundreds of miles away in a different part of the country via a video link and have your supervision like that. And I think that's probably one of the benefits that the online world has brought us, Ken, that we could cast our net very, very far where it comes to professional consultation.
Yeah, always when we speak about online and telephone working, make sure that you've done the training that is recommended by your ethical body. And remember that may well have changed. Pre-COVID would have been one set of recommendations. It's a lot more robust now, so make sure that is checked up on. And if you do find that you need some training, counsellingtutor.com, click on our products tab, and we have a really good online and telephone counselling training course that gives you the information that you will need to transfer face-to-face working to that medium. Staying with this, I wanted to go through some examples, Rory, because we hear about something, but how do we actually pin that into real life? And we've shared some examples from our own practice life, but I want to share the following examples. Counselling a friend. Now, this happens a lot at student level. I'm studying to become a counsellor or a psychotherapist, and a friend may say, I've been struggling with XYZ for a really long time. And I was thinking of reaching out and speaking to someone, but I feel a little bit uncomfortable because I know you and you're my friend. I wonder if I can tell you about my stuff here. So, scenario, a counsellor agrees to provide therapy to a long-term friend struggling with anxiety. What are the challenges? Well, the counsellor may avoid asking probing questions to protect the friendship.
Yeah.
The client may withhold information to avoid damaging the relationship. And it's difficult to maintain confidentiality if the counsellor sees them socially. It's within counselling, that confidentiality is sacred. But within friendships, how often is a friend telling us, don't tell anybody about X, Y, and Z, and before we know it, we're telling another friend, now you really mustn't tell anybody this by X, Y, Z, because we're not bound by the confidentiality of the ethical framework as we are in therapy. So there's that risk. And then counselling a colleague is another example here. You may be in an organization where the organization says, you're a counsellor, you got these skills, and this XYZ person is struggling a little bit. So what are the challenges? So the scenario is a therapist is asked to provide counselling to someone in the same organization. And the challenges here, workplace dynamics and hierarchy may influence what that therapeutic process feels like for both parties. Can you imagine giving therapy to the person who is responsible for giving you salary increases and promotions? Yeah, I can see it crossing in right now. Confidentiality may be compromised if others in the workplace are aware of the relationship, of both relationships. They know they're coming to counselling, and they know you're a counsellor, and they know all the relationships, so that may weaken that confidentiality. And the counsellor might avoid addressing issues that could impact or kind of hit the working relationship. I'll share one more, and this is counselling a family member. And again, it may be a distant family member that you don't see too often, that you want to see every 5 years or something, but it's still a family member. And the scenario, counsellor is approached for therapy by someone. Hold on, here we go. I'm reading the wrong one now. Scenario is a counsellor agrees to support a cousin experiencing grief, and the challenge is emotional entanglement can cloud professional boundaries. Prior knowledge, this is a big one, of prior knowledge of the client's history might lead to assumptions or biased interpretations.
Yes.
And the last one here is there's a risk the client may not feel free to speak openly. That one where you said yes, that prior knowledge is a massive one. And I think it links into what you presented, having a knowledge. Let's say I'm working with a cousin, and I know that cousin drinks too much. I may see all their problems through that lens. I can't be impartial and just welcome that person in because I was at that New Year's party where they were dancing on the tables and they don't remember it. I'm clouded by all of that. Dual relationships. Summary of the core challenges. Blurred boundaries lead to role confusion. The client may not feel safe or fully open. Risk of emotional harm or exploitation. Woof. Big, heavy words, and we want to avoid these, and that's why it's so important. Counsellor may struggle to remain ethically grounded and objective, and then possibility of ethical complaints or damage to your professional reputation. Final thoughts, Rory, on boundaries?
Well, I mean, in terms of boundaries, which is very much all about dual relationships, I would say that they're not automatically unethical. I mean, I think we throw the term unethical around a little bit too much in my view, but they need very careful managing and also a huge amount of reflection. And I think the starting point is client safety, the dignity, the relationship between the therapist and the client is sacrosanct, really, because the research is really, really clear. The biggest part, or one of the biggest parts of the curative factor of therapy is the therapeutic relationship. And anything that tarnishes that or fractures that is almost certainly going to impact on the client. So, yes, I would say that we need, where possible, to remove ourselves from dual relationships, or at least think very, very carefully before we go into a relationship where a dual relationship either exists or emerges, as I spoke about with supervisors, because it can emerge. That's the thing.
And that's the tricky thing. We've spoken about avoiding dual relationships here for ethical reasons and for the safety of our own practice and the client. But there's another discussion to be had, maybe for another podcast, Rory, and that's what you do and how you manage it if it should show itself, because they can emerge. Like you say, you can be in session 6 of somebody that you're working at a very deep level with, and it can emerge that there is a dual relationship. And what do? Do you pull the rug from under their feet and say, I can't work with you anymore, and off you go, and you're now on your own again, and you've got to start from the beginning? Or are there other ways of managing it? And of course, there are other ways of managing it. But I think we've covered the topic in the time we have for today. But maybe that's a think. That's something to take away from this. As a practitioner, maybe give some thought to what would you do if a dual relationship emerged during therapy. And I'll give you a clue. Step 1. Speak to your supervisor, unless of course the challenge sits with your supervisor, in which case go to step 2, speak to your supervisor.
Or take counsel from a trusted colleague. I think that peer discussions, I often speak, I spoke with my supervisor, but sometimes I would speak with a trusted peer to get a second opinion, as a qualified practitioner. But yeah, dual relationships, tricky and need managing with sensitivity.
We've got a handout for you. It covers everything we've spoken about today. It's got very helpfully the UK ethical bodies and what their kind of excerpts from the ethical framework, saying where the BACP thinks about this, UKCP, tripping over words today, HCPC, NCPS, all their codes of practice. Rory has gone through and lifted the parts on dual relationships. Also, we've got the definition of the dual relationship, why it matters, and we'll pop in some of those examples that we shared with you as well. So where do you get this free super duper handout? Well, simple. You go to counsellingtutor.com, click on our podcast tab, because that's what you're listening to right now, and go to episode 339. That's as simple as that. You can even search it. We've got a search bar, and if you put in 339 in the search bar, take you right to that podcast episode, and you can download it. It is free. And it's important, I think, as well. It's worth downloading, popping in your CPD file, having a handout, read over it, and give it some thought. So that is our ethical sustainable practice for today, and we now move smoothly into practice matters. I'm excited for today's one, Rory, because I was at the live lecture that Sally Anne Armitage gave. She is incredible. She really is. She's done many lectures for us in Counselling Tutor, but she spoke specifically about something that affects us even during studies, as a student, right through our practice, and that is that self-care. We say the word so often. We'll share that word with our supervisees, but what does it really mean? What does it really mean to you? There's no book on self-care. A, do this. B, do this. C, do this. And if there was a book, it would be wrong, because self-care means something different to me than it does to you, Rory, and it means something different to Sally Anne. So it's as individual as we each are, and she delves into this. Over to you, Rory, to take away that wonderful discussion.
Well, as I said in the introduction, Sally Ann delivered a fantastic lecture for both for anybody who came to watch it, and I spoke with her, and she spoke about what she delivered in that lecture, and this is what she had to say.
Practice Matters is proudly sponsored by the Counsellor CPD Library. To access top quality, relevant continuing professional development for your practice that you can do at a time that suits you, and all for less than the price of a cup of coffee, visit counsellingtutor.com.
My guest today is Sally Anne Armitage. Sally is joining me today to discuss some of the key points from a recent lecture for the Counsellor CPD and CSR Library titled Practicing Good Self-Care. We'll explore why self-care is essential for therapists, and maybe even touch on some practical tips you can apply as part of your self-care regime. So, Sally, it's good to catch up again.
Hello, Rory. It's been a while.
It has, hasn't it? It has. And it's good to catch up. And I'm really excited about this lecture because, therapists are very good at trying to look after other people. But I do wonder if we should apply the same vigour to self-care. And do you think we do? Do you think we do as therapists look after ourselves enough?
Mixed. I think it's mixed. I think some therapists have really got it, and they've really got a really good understanding of what works for them, what they access and when. They maybe have quite a good routine, and then others maybe not so much. And I'd count myself in probably the latter category. But it's like that meme, I don't know whether you've seen it, where it says therapist and then speech marks, don't forget to practice good self-care, and then also therapist, and it's a picture of this face and it's all sunken, it's like a character off a film. It's like so I think there is a thing about us saying, oh yeah, you must remember to do things that restore you, and then we're sort of dragging ourselves around and trying to look after ourselves and not doing a very good job necessarily. So I think it is a thing.
Yeah, and I think it's something that has to be actually planned. People talk about self-care, but in terms of my own self-care, it is actually planned. I plan to do things. I have a program of self-care, and it doesn't have to be huge things. It could be going for a walk, going for a swim, spending time with the grandkids. But I think it's a really interesting topic. And also, I think that sometimes self-care, I don't know your view on this, but I think sometimes we could just, our lives get so busy, not just as therapists, but as human beings with everything that goes on around us, that we can forget. We can just forget to look after ourselves.
Absolutely, we can, yeah. And it's not just what we do, but it's how we do it. You mentioned then that you go for a walk, and that's part of your self-care routine. And it's sometimes like how we go for that walk. Are we just making our legs move in a walkway, and then we walk, and then we get back, and it's almost been like a physical activity. I think there's a difference between, for me, walking because I need the steps and I want to get the exercise, and walking where I'm actually stopping and looking around me and listening to whatever the birds, the kids playing in the park, watching leaves move, watching birds, whatever it is that's around me. There's a difference between the first and the second. So it's not just sometimes what we do, but how we do it as well.
Yeah,
that difference between, like, there's a difference, I think, between self-care and leisure. And sometimes we do leisure and think, oh yeah, that's it now, I've done my self-care. But sometimes leisure is different to self-care. So you might go for a coffee with a friend and really enjoy it and have a great discussion, but it doesn't actually restore you in the way that you might need.
Yes.
So sometimes the two things are not all, and I think we do sometimes in our society, we confuse the two.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I take your point that, I see plenty of people. I live in a kind of semi-rural area, and a lot of people are running. And I often wonder, they may be taking care of the physical aspects of themselves, but I wonder if, as they're running through the beautiful little roads that I live near, I wonder if they ever stop and listen to the bird song, or just pause and look at the river and the canal, and just kind of get lost in that kind of daydream for a second. And that might be pretty difficult if you're running, because you don't want to daydream too much. You might daydream as you cross the road and get run over. But it does prove the point, doesn't it, that exercise and self-care are two different things.
Yeah, they are. And it comes down to that. I don't know whether you've heard this, but sometimes you can get so busy pedaling, like a metaphor, pedaling in life, that you don't stop to look at the view. And quite a lot of life is about pedaling.
Yes.
Pedaling to get through work, pedaling to get whatever kids from school, pedaling, and it's then getting tea on the table and then collapse. And then what happens then, and this is, this is a generalisation for the sake of this talking to you, Rory, but what can happen in our society is we do things like doom scroll, on Facebook or whatever.
Oh, yes.
Watch TV, play computer games. And none of these things are bad, but what they can do is take us away from our own bodies and into this zone of quick images, flashing lights, little snippets of content very fast. And we effectively leave our state, leave our bodies. And I think that's becoming a bit of a thing where we're not necessarily, I think, and this is what I talk about in the lecture, we're not necessarily having a strong link between our minds and our bodies as much as perhaps we could. And think about it in a normal, like, work routine where we might sort of feel really hungry at 10:30, but I can't eat now because it's not my lunchtime until 12. So yes. Ignore that feeling.
Yes.
We're routinely sort of developing in our society the ability to ignore our bodies and do what needs to be done.
Yeah.
And I think that's influencing how much we're able to look after ourselves.
Yeah, it's amazing, isn't it? I know you've got a young child, and I've got a young granddaughter, and it's amazing just how disinhibited they are with social norms. They eat when they want, they sleep when they want. They don't have the same societal expectations. And we were talking off air before that as you get older, I think you just get conditioned into, we have our tea at 1 o'clock, we go to bed at 10 o'clock, we do this, we don't do that. And we're our own worst enemies sometimes, aren't we, I think?
We are. And some of the structures we can't, to a point we can't negotiate, like work, like time to get to school, like time to pick up the kids from school. So there's some of these structures that are pinned in our day that can sort of orchestrate how things play out. And I did, as part of my research for this Oh, you know what it's like, Rory. It's been like a rabbit hole. I've gone down so many avenues. Yeah, you don't know where to start, do you,
No,
sometimes?
you don't.
But yeah, no. I could have talked all day, but two of the things that I've done that I feel like are relevant to mention here is I put a post on social media in a neurodivergent adult page,
Yeah.
and a post on the Counselling Tutor page that people are responding to. And I want to get some perspectives about how people manage self-care. And it's interesting what you just said about watching the young people in our lives and how in the moment and uninhibited they are.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that came through from the neurodivergent adults page is I am starting to listen to my needs and respond to them.
Yes.
So if I'm hungry, I eat. If I'm thirsty, I drink. If I'm sleepy, I go to sleep.
Yes.
And it's been so empowering.
It is. It is.
Yeah.
It's absolutely empowering. In fact, I'm actually laughing inside because I was recently giving a workshop in Hull, and we went out at the end of the day to eat, and about 8:30, I said to the person I was speaking to, "I'm going to bed now." And with that, I just said, "Lovely to see you." I went to bed, and I'm sure that the person I was speaking to must have thought I was some degree of crazy. Because it wasn't a negotiation. It wasn't, "Oh, I feel tired, I'll hang around for a bit." It was like, "I need to go to bed. I need to go to bed now." And I'm kind of, I don't know about you, but I kind of listen to those prompts from my body now. If my body says I need to go to sleep, that my body's telling me something that I need to listen to.
Yeah, but you've developed and nurtured a skill there. You might not, I don't know whether you consciously know this, but you've built the ability to listen to the signals your body is giving you.
Yeah.
And that's wonderful, isn't it? That ability to say, "Oh, what's going on for me? What do I need? Oh, I need to sleep." Right.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Whereas I think sometimes that voice becomes so quiet.
Yeah.
That voice of what it is, and it can come out in other ways instead, like burnout, like feeling very angry, all sorts of other ways that these needs can be vented. But it's not actually what needs to happen.
Yeah.
It's just overload because there's a need somewhere. It's like about my poor son, he starts to sort of become dysregulated, and we're giving it, do you need a drink? Do you need food? Do you want a quiet time? You do this list of things because we know there's something there, but we could do that for ourselves.
Absolutely.
What do I need?
Yeah.
What's there?
And I think clocks are terrible things to some extent.
Oh, they are.
Because I was listening to a song and it says, that part of the lyric was, "You don't tell time, time tells you." And I think that's very true. I think the advent of clocks, although they're very useful for people to get to places on time, regulates us in a way that may not be the same as our body. I'm interested in what you were saying about social media and doom scrolling. Just say a little bit more about that and how that might affect self-care.
Well, the thing I think that's happening, especially with social media, Facebook, I don't know whether you've ever noticed this. I don't know whether you even do it right, but for people who are listening to this, you might have done it. Nothing that I see, or very rarely, anything that I see on Facebook is deeply fulfilling and enough. I don't get my needs satiated.
Yeah.
For whatever my need is in that moment, nothing is satiating about what I'm seeing. So I keep looking.
Yeah.
It never hits, it never lands, it's never what I'm looking for. And that's very indistinct, I know, but that's the feeling. I'm not getting what I'm looking for. So I just keep looking and viewing more things to try and reach this point where my need is fulfilled.
Yes.
This indistinct need, but it never is.
Yes.
It never is. I never get anything that works, that fulfills or lands in the way that I need it to. So eventually I just think, oh my goodness, it's been an hour. I need to stop this. So it's not fulfilled for me any purpose. It's just fast forwarded my hour.
Yeah.
And that's my experience. And some people, you might follow pages that you're really passionate about and you see things routinely that you love. But for me, I don't have that experience, and I don't think I'm alone with that.
No, I don't think you are alone. I mean, if you go through X, it used to be called Twitter and now X, it is it's as you say, doom scrolling is a really good way, because it shows you situations without context, comment without analysis.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to scroll through and say, that is the world. That's the world. And in fact, it's not the world. It isn't the world, but it's a very persuasive. And I'm guessing that, within that scrolling, there'll be adverts that the social media companies will put in for things you don't need.
Yeah, there certainly is.
Yeah.
There certainly is. And I'm worried about how this is sort of heading, with the prevalence of people and myself and the young people in my circles sort of sitting and doing this. And the thing is, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, but you can stop. You realise it's really late or whatever brings you to stop, and you go, crikey, I'm starving.
Yeah.
And it's actually... It's invited you to totally ignore your physical sensations.
Yeah.
And if you're doing that for hours every day.
Yeah. Or I want to go to the bathroom.
Yeah. I need the loo.
You need the loo. Yeah, as we say up north, we need the loo. So I think that's something to be careful of.
Yeah.
And the news in general. I mean, you look at internet news feeds, and you soon become to realise that good news doesn't sell and bad news sells a lot.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. And that means that we're getting this sort of distorted perspective on the world.
Yeah.
Because you're right. News is new and it's usually negative. So we're not getting the long-term events that are actually quite positive, the movements that are actually trying to improve society. We're not getting reports about how that's going.
No.
So yeah, you're absolutely right. It gives a distorted perspective. But I think this thing about brain to body, I guess, dialogue, I think it's really interesting to me. And I think that kind of might be the centre of, because we've got quite a bit of a mental health crisis, really, Rory. The amount of people that are going to the GP and saying, I can't cope, I can't function, I'm whatever, depressed, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, whatever words that feel right for people. So something is not going very well.
No.
Which is why I'm so pleased to be doing this lecture, because I feel like it's needed.
Yeah.
Putting it together felt important, you know what I mean, right?
It is, because, I think it's important for a lot of reasons. One is purely for our own health. There's old saying, physician, heal thyself, isn't there? We sit there and support people in their own healing processes, and I think it's good. I think it's good practice to do that. And I also think longevity in the work, because if you don't practice some sort of self-care, I'm guessing that eventually the work will just burn you out. It'll just burn you out and spit you out.
It does. And I think I'm interested in, when I reflect on my own journey, I've been a therapist for about 15 years. And when, honestly, this was me at the start, Rory, I would have said to you, I can see 8 clients a day. Honestly, It's no problem to me. It's no problem. I can do this work, and I don't find it to be a drain. And that was honestly me. But over the years, my capacity is reducing and reducing and reducing. I think that's just a testament to how much of a drain this is on some facilities within us, some essence or energy within us as therapists. And then self-care becomes even more important, doesn't it? Because if you've got that natural trend, and I think that's quite a common experience, that it's slowly but surely you choose to see fewer clients, and it might take years, but slowly but surely there's that slow pattern of, and then I think, well, honestly, my self-care needs work.
Yeah.
So maybe my self-care could have changed that, and will change that hopefully from this point forward, because I feel like I'm a lot more on it now because of doing this.
Well, there you go. You always say that the best way of learning is to teach something, Sally.
I believe that. I believe that.
It's very true. And I'll pick up on your point. I think it's really interesting. I've gone down the route of, when I first started many, many years ago, I was like you. I wanted to see more clients and doing more work. And over the years, I started to limit the amount of people I saw and supervised. And then last year, I actually thought, well, I think I've done enough now. I think I've put my contribution in terms of clinical work, not this work or the courses that we run. And I retired from clinical practice, and it felt just about the right time.
Yeah.
And I was speaking to someone the other week, and they were saying, "You fancy going back?" And I said, "No, I don't. I've done that. That's part of my life that's done."
You've passed the baton.
I passed the baton. Yes,
Yeah.
I passed the baton. But it's the important process of self-care, and I think what I want to ask you is, knowing when to stop. Is that, do you think, an important aspect of long-term self-care?
Knowing when to stop, and that power of knowing when to say no. And that's another thing that's come up in my research, when to say no.
Yes.
We quite often say yes, don't we? Oh, yeah, can I come and see you for this? Yeah, thinking about the diary at Eep.
Yeah.
But yeah, knowing when to say no, and knowing when, and you tap into your own individual, like, warning signs. My warning signs have always been, I get more irritable with family, and I want to withdraw more.
Yeah.
So there are my two. And sometimes I can feel my body wanting to do it, and then my brain catches up. So I'm like, why am I sat upstairs on my bed when my son and my husband are downstairs having fun?
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's these signs.
And we have to acknowledge, of course, that, the listener may be, having to counsel to pay bills, to put food on the table. So sometimes it's not that easy just to step away and say, I'm going to do less, because, cost of living is up, and, the cost of living is generally more expensive. But
yeah, it is.
I guess eventually it'll catch up with you anyway, won't it?
It will catch up with you. Yeah, it will. And again, I know this is the theme of this, but again, it's self-care, isn't it? It's getting the balance right.
Yes.
Because you're right. Many of us can't just say, oh, I'm going to take a break, or I'm going to reduce my client load, because it's not an option. And think about people who work for organisations, maybe the NHS, they're going to get 5 clients a day whether they like it or not.
Absolutely.
I mean, they might have some fantastic management, or not. Hopefully, you've got a good manager who would give you a little bit of sort of flexibility, but quite often that's the job. You've got 5 clients,
Yeah.
And that's very difficult to manage, because this profession does give of us so much, to sit with people and sit with emotion as we do, and sit with, despair.
Yeah.
Sometimes, to be able to, allow that to have space does take its toll.
Yes.
Even with the best will in the world, especially if you work at relational depth, that can really take a toll on a person. And I'm not saying, the other modalities it's not so much, because I can't say that. But I think that with this profession especially, and any helping profession, I don't think it's just about therapy. It's about nursing. It's about people who work in reception in GPs, GPs themselves, anybody who gives of themselves.
Yeah, people work in call centres.
Call centres,
Yeah.
People who work with people, and sometimes with people that are cross, raised emotions. People who work in banks, you name it.
Yes.
It's so important to find something that fills up the tank that we're constantly taking a little bit out of.
Yes.
And which is why this is so important, self-care.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's a great topic. It's a kind of, evergreen topic, Sally.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it's really good that you've delivered this lecture. So practicing good self-care is available now in the CSR and the CPD library if you want to view it. And before we part ways, what takeaways, Sally, do you hope that someone may have after seeing your lecture? What's your hope that they'll take away?
I hope you're going to take away loads, to be honest. That's the whole point of it. But something I want to give you, I want you to take away something from this, just listening to this. Because the research suggests, and this might be new to some of you, and it might not be new to some of you, that if you just look out of the window and look far away, So look at a view that's far away, look to the horizon. It's already going to improve your mental well-being. So if you can do that and also look at green, it doesn't even need to be real green. It can be a picture of some greenery. It can be a pretend house plant. Just put your eyes on it and consider its leaves, consider its colour, looking far away and looking at plants and leaf and greenery are already going to improve your mental health. Can you believe that, Rory?
Well, as someone who's spent a lifetime looking out the window with a cup of tea,
Yeah.
I've often talked about my favourite hobby. Someone asked me what my hobby was the other week, and I said, I look out the window with a cup of tea. I could do that for hours. I think you're spot on. And, the tea's just an added bonus.
It's
for me.
always a bonus.
But but to find out that my self-care regime is actually backed up by research is massively reassuring. So, as I said, practicing good self-care is available now in the CSR and CPD library, and it just goes for me to say, Sally Anne Armitage, thank you so much for joining us.
Massive thank you, as always, to the wonderful Sally Anne. Thank you to you, Rory, for holding those all-important discussions. If you're listening to this and you're a member of our libraries, we've got two libraries. One's for students, a student library. The other one is a CPD library, only for qualified practitioners. If you're a member, log in. It's right there. It's just been added. Go and watch the full lecture. It is phenomenal. 5-star reviews from over 500 people when we did it live. It's worth going and having a look at it. And if you're wondering what are these libraries, if you're not a member, go to counsellingtutor.com, click on our products tab, you'll see them there. Really, our libraries, we make them low cost, high value. We're putting new stuff in there on a weekly basis. We really are. It's absolutely jam-packed with top quality CPD lectures that are mapped to learning outcomes and that are really implementable within our practice for less than the price of a cup of coffee for 2 people per month. Just 1 cup of coffee for me and Rory. I'm talking to you, Rory, that's what I'm saying there.
Oh, yes.
It's what it costs to be a member of the library and have access to more CPD than you can shake a stick at. And I think one of the things that is really useful with the CPD library is if you have a certain client presentation, like let's say we spoke today about dual relationships, you just put it in the search bar and go and read up on that topic or watch a lecture on it, and we can inform ourselves in real time for the presentations that our clients bring. Counsellingtutor.com, click on products. Moving on now to student services, where we see you students on your formal journey to become counsellors, psychotherapists, or to gain skills in counselling and active listening to use in the work that you do. And today we're going to be speaking about what is my counselling philosophy. And here's Rory's answer.
Well, yes, and I put this in because it's something that comes up from time to time in our Facebook group. And if you're not a member of our Facebook group, go to Facebook, Counselling Tutor, and you'll find us there. And it sometimes comes up in assignments, and students are asked, what's my counselling philosophy? And when I was asked this question as a student, I thought, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to read Immanuel Kant, or I'm going to have to read Descartes, or I don't know, Vishnu, or all the other philosophers. And I didn't realise at the time, being slightly ignorant of the academic world, that it was my counselling philosophy, not theirs. And effectively, if you'd removed the term philosophy and put in what are my counselling values, because philosophy is all about talking about values, about how you treat others and society in general, it makes a lot more sense. And my answer is that you treat everybody, you offer the best possible service, you practice your modality, you try where you can to make a difference in people's lives, and where you can't, you make a referral. Now that would be a very short assignment, but I did reference my modality. I think in mine I might have even put in Martin Luther King's view, where he said he judged people on their character. He talks about character, not the colour of their skin. It's like kind of an older view now. I know there's some more modern views in terms of discussing race and culture, but it was a long time ago, and I put that in. And then at the end of my studies, I was asked how my values had changed. And that was another interesting conversation about, after having done my 100 hours, really, how my values had changed. And my answer to that was that it's probably not as easy to impose your values in the therapy room, because you're working with two sets of values. Clients have their own value system, and you have yours. And what you have to do is part of my therapeutic modality was unconditional positive regard. You had to realize that other people's lives were very, very different to yours, and not to try to impose your values or your philosophy onto them. And as I think I might have written in my assignment, don't leave any fingerprints on the client. In other words, don't tarnish the client with your philosophy. They shouldn't be a clone of you. They should be developing who they want to be.
Oh, I like that. That is really powerful. That really is. I mean, that keys right into not creating dependence, but independence through counselling and psychotherapy. I like it. So what does this mean to me? And that's the question that's asked in this topic. So the actual topic name is, what is my counselling philosophy? And then it says, and here's my answer. So Rory's shared a little bit of his answer, and it's going to be as unique as each person that listens to this. And you can answer this at student level, and you can answer it at practitioner level when you're out practicing. And you may find that it changes over the arc of your practice as you develop and learn more and find out more about self, which is interesting. By exploring ourselves deeper, we broaden our reference to be able to serve our clients. But I'm going to share mine. So my training was person-centered, and what really appealed to me towards the end of my studies, when I'd learned to trust the process, because at first I thought, okay, that's great, seeing the theory and learning it and being able to write assignments about it. But when I started seeing the theory showing itself within sessions, I began to trust the process and recognize that the modality was going to underpin who I needed to be within the counselling room. So I guess that's a part of my philosophy, is to trust the process of the modality that underpins my working, or did underpin my working while I was in practice. And the bit that really stood out for me from person-centered therapy, but originated the genesis of it is with Maslow, and Rogers took it from Maslow, and it is that self-actualization that Rogers mentions, given soil of a different kind, the correct soil, that the client will find their own way. We don't have to lead them. We don't have to show them what to do. We don't have to tell them what to do. More than that, we just need to trust that they will find their way if we can provide that soil of a different kind. And of course, the soil of a different kind is without judgment. It's that full acceptance of that person. It's being empathic to who they are and the journey that they're on. And of course, we can go deeper into the theory, but that's what it is for me. And then underpinning that philosophy is the, I guess, humanistic underpinning that there's no bad person. Now, this is my philosophy. This is not a truth in reality. It is just my philosophy, and that's what we're talking about here. You can fully disagree with this. From my viewpoint, I look out and I hope there is no such thing as a bad person. There's many people that have done bad things, many. And I look at that not to judge the person and say that's a bad thing, but to look and say, wow, the road that you have walked has brought you to this point in your life, but underlying it, there is a real, good, genuine, honest, loving, kind person. Now that we don't always see in humanity, and we don't always see in the people that we interact with. So that's, I guess, maybe a leap of faith for me, but that's why it's a philosophy. And I get to have my philosophy and then put myself out there in the world and have it proven either right or wrong. And it's still the philosophy that I stick to right now as I look out into the world. And I wonder, you listening to this, what your philosophy is. And I look back at students we had, Rory, and many of them, not many, some of them, their philosophy was to move away from the base modality that they trained in because they'd done a comparative model, and that seemed a lot more alluring and seemed a better fit for them, and that's okay too, and I think what is very important here is that there is a philosophy. And what's interesting is how it changes. And if you look to Rogers' writing, if you look to A Way of Being and read that book, you recognize that towards the end of his career, I don't even know if he was still, I think he'd finished seeing clients at that time, and he was doing encounter groups around the world, wasn't even seeing clients anymore. His philosophy was still changing, and it changed to that there was an unseen aspect to therapy, something that could not be described, almost spiritual in nature. Now, it's interesting because if you look at Rogers's biography, and you can get that on counsellingtutor.com, put in Carl Rogers, and his biography is there, written up beautifully by Rory, and it's really in depth. If you're writing assignments on Rogers, it's a good read. It's got all the dates and stuff in there. But if you look at where Rogers started off, his roots were in quite a religious family, and it's interesting how he moved away from that and then moved right back to that towards the end of his career, acknowledging that there was something that you couldn't put into words, a power, a spiritual movement that kind of took place within counselling. And that it is interesting to see that even Carl Rogers was changing his philosophy as he was going through his years, Rory.
Oh yeah, it's so lovely to hear that, Ken, and so lovely to hear your philosophy. And you spoke about Carl Rogers, and of course, Carl Rogers had a lot of influential students who went on to be, I guess, spokespeople for humanity in their own way. And I fell in love with John Schleen, who's one of Rogers' students. I've talked about him on the podcast before. And he wrote his principles, John Schleen's principles. And one of them was, don't put old wine in new bottles. In other words, if you're doing person-centered therapy, do person-centered. Don't dress it up as something else. He also said, do what you want, but call it what it is, which I think is very kind of transparent, and would say to the client, this is how I practice, this is what it is, so the client knows what they're getting. But one that's left the most indelible mark on me through the years was what he said about phenomenology. He said, we may have denials, cover-ups, and lapses of memory, but we are the ultimate source. Deeply phenomenologically. In other words, we know our own truths. Deep down, we know our own truths. And sometimes within therapy, we need an environment to be able to speak our own truths and to be able to confront them. And I think that is really the essence of therapy for me. And that, if I had to write that onto anything, I would say that summed my philosophy up very neatly. John Schleen's principles.
Student Services is sponsored by Counselling Skills Academy. Can't tell you how many times Rory and I have heard counselling students say that learning skills and knowing that they're using them effectively is really, really challenging. The reason for this is because we don't get to see another counsellor using skills in a real live session. In reality, this means that we're asked to learn something that we can never see demonstrated in a real setting, and it's no wonder that many of us are left feeling unsure. If you want to see counselling skills used in real sessions by qualified therapists, so this is real sessions, real presentations, and real use of skills, then go to counsellingskillsacademy.com. There's some free videos on skills, including a full live session that you can have a look at. Gain the competence and the confidence of knowing you're using your counselling skills effectively. Just visit counsellingskillsacademy.com. Powerful. It is powerful. And it's interesting, if you listen to both Rory and myself speaking about what our philosophy is, it is based on the work of others, the reading of others, the standing on the shoulders of others. It's the best view. It really is. And I wonder what your philosophy is listening to this. And, you get to put your stamp on your therapy. There's one other story that I love of Carl Rogers, and I don't know where it's printed, and I'm probably going to make a total hash up of this, but I'm going to give you my best shot of it. The story goes like this, that Carl Rogers was at a conference, and at this conference he was room sharing with two of his students, two students that were like looking at studying person-centered counseling with him. And after the day had done and they were kind of back in the room, a conversation broke out with the two students about the future of person-centered therapy and how it would be practiced and how it would develop. And Carl Rogers didn't say a word. He just put his pajamas on, got into bed, and went to sleep, because he'd already said person-centered therapy will be as individualistic as the humans that practice it. And I think that's beautiful, and that requires that we should have a philosophy, to practice whatever modality you practice. You're going to have your human stamp on it. Your experience, your core goes into that. And it's worth putting words to that and calling it a philosophy of how, why, and what underpins it for you. And we've spoken on this podcast many times about what your why is, the reason you became a counselor or a therapist in the very first place. And that might be the kernel, the seed of your philosophy. Combine that with what have you learnt? What have you learnt and what resonates with you? What is important in that therapeutic relationship? And then you get out and you get to see that come to life in your clients as you work with them. I think it's a beautiful thing, a philosophy.
It is, and it isn't just one to write in an assignment and stick on the shelf and let it gather dust. I think your philosophy is worth revisiting from time to time. So if you have written at any point what your philosophy of counselling is, maybe worth getting that assignment out and looking at it and say, is that me now? Am I the same person that wrote that? Or would I want to rewrite it again and have a think about it? And I think that kind of reflection is hugely important for a therapist to sustain themselves through the years, because we don't want to be dogmatic. We don't want to be stuck in one particular view of our philosophy, because philosophies by their very nature move on. And Rogers, very accurately pointed out that, the people of tomorrow, he wrote a lot about the people of tomorrow in a way of being, would be the people who practice. So, if you have, maybe worth just sitting, thinking, writing your assignment, and then, putting a date in your diary for another 3 or 4 years and revisiting it and look at it, maybe with your supervisor, and see how it's changed, or it may have just stayed the same, but it should be, I think, a living thing. It should be something that we reflect on a lot, would be my view.
Indeed. Thank you, Rory. And, if you are a student and you're listening to this, I'm going to encourage you to jump online and go to counsellingtutor.com. And right at the top, right at the very, very top, there's 2 words. One says qualified, and you can click on that if you're qualified. And the other one says student. And if you click on student, there's a whole section of the website that is dedicated to free resources for students. Everything from equality, diversity, inclusion, this is all free. E-therapy, so online working, practice like note-taking and contracting, skills that we use, silence, immediacy, open questions. There's a study help section that is going to help you get through the assignments that are set for counselors and psychotherapists. And then, of course, we have our product section as well, where we have the library for students if you're interested in that. But 90% of the stuff on the website is free for students. Just click on the Students tab. Use the search function if you're looking for something particular. Let's say you're looking at the 7 Stages of Process by Carl Rogers. Click on search, put in 7 Stages of Process, and all the information will be there. They're all fact-checked. They're written by tutors and our academic team. We don't make it up. We bring together the the facts from the textbooks, and we put the references from whence they came as well, so that you're able to reference the official books that the information came from and do your further reading there. So there it is. That was episode 339 of the Counselling Tutor Podcast.
Yes, and we visited in ethical sustainable practice, or revisited the dangers of dual relationships. Took a slightly different view of it, looking at the relationship primarily between a therapist and their supervisor, and what dual relationships could materialize or develop there. On to practice matters. Fantastic interview with Sally Anne Armitage, an audience favourite, and she was discussing her lecture on practicing self-care. That, of course, is available in the Counsellor's CPD and CSR libraries. Now, it was well attended. Over 500 people came to that, and the reviews were absolutely stunning. So if you are a member, very, very well worth you visiting that. And if you're not a member, well, you could consider signing up to watch it. And then in student services, what is my counselling philosophy? Ken and myself discussed our philosophies of counselling, and we kind of talked about how you develop a philosophy, what you might have to think about if you're a student writing an assignment asking you that very question. So thank you for your likes, your shares, your subscriptions. They all mean the world to us. And until next time, stay grounded. Stay safe.
Take the stress out of your counselling studies and get the support of Rory and I by joining us in the Counselling Study Resource. Counselling Study Resource, or CSR for short, is the world's most comprehensive assignment guidance and study support resource for students just like you of counselling and psychotherapy. See how Counselling Study Resource can help you. Visit counsellingtutor.com. That's counsellingtutor.com.
Thank you for listening to the Counselling Tutor Podcast. Find the show notes for this episode by visiting counsellingtutor.com.